The remote waters off Cape Cod had always been considered a predictable hunting ground, where commercial fishermen could work their trade without fear of anything more dangerous than rough weather or equipment failure. Captain Rick Santos had been running lobster traps in these waters for 37 years, pulling up his catch in the pre-dawn darkness while most of the world still slept. But the morning of September 15th would end his career in the most violent way imaginable. Santos was alone on his 30-foot boat, hauling traps from depths of 60 feet, when something massive struck his vessel from below. The impact sent him sprawling across the deck as his boat listed dangerously to starboard. The great white shark that breached beside his boat was unlike anything he had seen in nearly 4 decades of fishing these waters. 18 feet of prehistoric fury, its massive bulk dripping seawater as it crashed back into the ocean just yards from where Santos struggled to regain his footing. The predator's second attack came without warning. Its massive jaws closed around the boat's outboard motor, the crushing force of its bite shearing through the metal housing like paper. Santos watched in horror as 3,000 pounds of apex predator thrashed against his vessel, its primitive brain driven by instincts that recognized no difference between his boat and the seals it typically hunted. The shark's death roll sent waves crashing over the gunwales, flooding the small vessel as Santos desperately tried to reach his radio. But the predator wasn't finished. Its massive head rose from the churning water, black eyes fixed on the human who had invaded its territory. Santos's scream was cut short as the shark's jaws closed around his leg, dragging him over the side into water that had turned crimson with his blood. The last transmission from his boat was a garbled distress call that Coast Guard operators initially dismissed as equipment malfunction. His body was never recovered. The wreckage of his boat, found 3 days later, bore tooth marks that marine biologists measured at over 2 inches deep, evidence of a predator larger than any great white previously documented in New England waters. The investigation revealed that water temperatures had risen dramatically over the past decade, drawing massive sharks north from their traditional hunting grounds. Santos had become the first victim of an ecological shift that was bringing apex predators into waters where they had never been seen before. 2 weeks later, a routine military training exercise in the swamps of South Carolina would prove that predatory violence was escalating across multiple ecosystems throughout the American Southeast. Sergeant Maria Valdez was leading a squad of Marines through the Congaree National Park wetlands when they encountered the alligator that would end her military career. The training exercise was designed to test navigation skills in challenging terrain, but none of the Marines had prepared for a confrontation with a prehistoric predator that viewed their presence as an invasion. The massive American alligator emerged from the black water without warning, its 14-foot bulk moving with shocking speed through the cypress swamp. Valdez's squad had been crossing a shallow channel when the predator struck, its massive jaws targeting the lead Marine with the precision of a creature that had perfected ambush tactics over millions of years. Private Johnson's scream echoed through the swamp as the alligator's crushing bite closed around his torso. The animal's death roll began immediately, a hunting technique designed to disorient prey, while drowning it in the murky water where human rescue was nearly impossible. Valdez's training kicked in as she drew her sidearm and fired multiple rounds into the alligator's armored hide. The bullets had little effect on a creature designed to survive encounters with much larger predators, but the noise and impact caused it to release Johnson and retreat toward deeper water. The 19-year-old Marine survived the attack, but lost his left arm below the elbow to injuries so severe that field amputation was the only option for saving his life. The squad's emergency evacuation from the swamp took 6 hours, during which they documented multiple large alligators moving through the area, with none of the typical avoidance behavior that had historically made such encounters rare. Wildlife officials investigating the incident discovered that the swamp's alligator population had exploded over the past 5 years, with specimens reaching sizes that hadn't been seen since before commercial hunting decimated their numbers in the early 1900s. The largest individuals were displaying increasingly aggressive territorial behavior, viewing any intrusion into their domain as a challenge that required violent response. The attack on Johnson's squad forced military officials to suspend training exercises in South Carolina's wetlands, but similar incidents continued to occur as alligators throughout the Southeast adopted increasingly aggressive behaviors toward humans who entered their territory. 3 months after the Marines' encounter in South Carolina, a routine construction project in the mountains of Colorado would demonstrate that even North America's most familiar predators were becoming deadly in ways that wildlife experts struggled to understand. The work crew building a new ski lift access road had been blasting through a rocky outcrop when they disturbed the mountain lion that had been denning in a cave system directly above their operation. Unlike the secretive, reclusive cats described in wildlife manuals, this predator responded to the disturbance with immediate and overwhelming aggression. Jake Morrison was operating the excavator when the cat struck. The 140-pound predator launched itself from the rocks above, landing on the machine's cab with enough force to shatter the safety glass. Morrison's attempt to escape the cab came too late. The mountain lion's claws found purchase on his shoulders as he tried to climb out. The cat's attack was swift and efficient. Its powerful jaws closed around Morrison's neck, applying the crushing pressure that these predators used to kill deer and elk. The construction workers' struggles only seemed to increase the cat's determination to complete the kill. Foreman Dave Chen's intervention with a crowbar saved Morrison's life, but cost him 3 fingers when the mountain lion redirected its attack toward this new threat. The cat's claws, designed to grip struggling prey, raked across Chen's hands as he tried to beat the predator away from his employee. The mountain lion's retreat came only after it had established dominance over the human intruders who had dared to disturb its territory. Morrison survived with severe neck injuries that required months of surgery to repair, while Chen's mutilated hands ended his 30-year career in construction. The investigation revealed that this mountain lion had been involved in multiple aggressive encounters with humans throughout the Colorado Rockies. The animal had apparently lost its natural fear of people and was actively defending territory it considered off-limits to human activity. Wildlife officials noted that the cat's willingness to attack multiple humans simultaneously represented an unprecedented escalation in mountain lion aggression. Traditional safety measures, based on making noise and appearing large, were proving inadequate against predators that had decided humans were unacceptable in their environment. 6 weeks after the construction crew's nightmare in Colorado, an incident at a remote research station in Alaska would prove that predatory violence was reaching even the most isolated corners of North America. Dr. Sarah Kim had been conducting climate research at a weather station near the Arctic Circle when the polar bear appeared at her facility's perimeter. The massive male, weighing over 800 pounds, had traveled hundreds of miles from his normal hunting grounds as sea ice continued to disappear from the warming Arctic. Kim was alone at the station when the bear began its methodical assault on the building's defenses. Unlike the opportunistic scavenging behavior typically associated with polar bear encounters, this animal seemed determined to reach the human inside, regardless of the obstacles in its path. The bear's massive claws made short work of the station's reinforced door, tearing through metal and wood designed to withstand Arctic storms. Kim's retreat to the facility's communications room bought her precious time to send a distress signal, but the nearest rescue was over 200 miles away. The polar bear's invasion of the research station was systematic and terrifying. The animal moved through the building like a force of nature, destroying everything in its path, while tracking Kim's scent through the maze of corridors and equipment rooms. Kim's final transmission described the bear breaking through the communications room door, its massive bulk filling the doorway as it fixed its black eyes on the terrified scientist. The audio feed captured her screams as the predator closed the distance between them, followed by silence that lasted until rescue teams arrived 3 days later. They found Kim's body in the station's wreckage, the building destroyed by a predator that had apparently spent hours systematically hunting its human prey. The polar bear was never located, having disappeared back into the Arctic wilderness, where it continued to pose a threat to any humans unlucky enough to cross its path. The investigation revealed that polar bears throughout the Arctic were becoming increasingly aggressive as climate change destroyed their traditional hunting grounds. The animals were venturing into human settlements with growing frequency, their desperation driving them to view people as acceptable prey rather than threats to be avoided. These encounters across North America reveal a terrifying pattern of predatory behavior that is transforming the relationship between humans and the continent's most dangerous wildlife. From the great white sharks hunting in New England's warming waters to the polar bears invading Arctic research stations, apex predators are abandoning the behavioral patterns that once made coexistence possible. The animals involved in these attacks represent a new generation of predators that view humans not as threats to be avoided, but as competitors to be eliminated or prey to be consumed. Whether driven by environmental change, habitat loss, or evolutionary adaptation, these creatures are crossing boundaries that wildlife experts once considered absolute. If these harrowing accounts of predator encounters left you questioning your safety in America's wilderness areas, hit that like button and subscribe for more shocking stories of when nature's deadliest hunters decide humans are fair game. Each week, we document the most terrifying predator attacks from across the continent, revealing how environmental changes are creating new dangers in places we once considered safe. Because understanding these evolving threats could mean the difference between a successful outdoor adventure and becoming the next victim of predators that no longer fear human presence. The oil rig platform 30 miles off the coast of Louisiana had been operating without incident for 18 months, its massive steel structure rising from the Gulf's depths like a man-made island dedicated to extracting petroleum from the ocean floor. The crew of 47 men worked in rotating shifts, maintaining the complex machinery that kept crude oil flowing toward refineries along the Texas coast. Chief diver Tommy Broussard had been working these waters for over a decade, his expertise in underwater welding and structural inspection making him invaluable to offshore operations throughout the Gulf. The 43-year-old Cajun had grown up in the bayous south of New Orleans, learning to work underwater before he could legally drive a car. His reputation for staying calm under pressure had earned him assignments on some of the most challenging drilling platforms in the region. But nothing in Broussard's extensive experience had prepared him for what was hunting in the waters beneath their rig. The massive bull shark that had taken up residence around the platform's underwater supports was unlike any predator he had encountered in thousands of dives throughout the Gulf of Mexico. The trouble began during routine maintenance on the rig's primary support columns, massive steel pillars that extended 200 feet below the surface to anchor the platform against hurricane-force winds and crushing waves. Broussard and his diving partner, Luis Hernandez, had been inspecting welds and checking for structural fatigue when they first noticed something large moving in the murky depths below their work area. The Gulf's naturally poor visibility made it difficult to identify marine life at distances greater than 20 feet, but both divers had developed an instinct for recognizing potential threats in the underwater environment. The shadow moving through the platform's support structure was too large and too purposeful to be anything harmless. Hernandez, a 28-year-old from Galveston who had been diving professionally for 6 years, was the first to spot the predator clearly. The bull shark that emerged from the platform's maze of underwater supports was easily 12 feet long, its massive bulk moving with the confident stride of an apex predator that had claimed this territory as its exclusive hunting ground. Bull sharks were known throughout the Gulf for their aggressive nature and their willingness to hunt in shallow water where other shark species rarely ventured. But this specimen was larger than anything either diver had encountered, and its behavior suggested a level of territorial aggression that went far beyond normal predator patterns. The shark's first investigation of the diving team was methodical and unsettling. The animal circled their work area at a distance of about 30 feet, its black eyes fixed on the humans who had invaded its domain. Unlike most marine predators, which typically fled when confronted with unfamiliar objects, this shark seemed to be studying their movements and equipment with obvious intelligence. Broussard's attempt to complete their inspection work was hampered by the shark's persistent presence. The animal followed their movements around the platform's support structure, maintaining a constant distance that suggested it was waiting for the right moment to strike, rather than simply investigating their presence. The platform's fish population had exploded over the 18 months since drilling operations began, creating an artificial reef that attracted marine life from throughout the region. Schools of red snapper, grouper, and amberjack had made the rig's underwater structure their permanent home, providing abundant food for larger predators that followed the baitfish into the area. But this bull shark seemed less interested in the abundant fish population than in the human divers who entered its territory twice daily. The animal's behavior suggested it had learned to associate diving operations with territorial intrusion that required aggressive response. The attack came on their third day of maintenance work, when Hernandez was 60 feet below the surface, inspecting a critical well joint that showed signs of stress fractures. The shark's approach was invisible until the moment of impact, its massive bulk emerging from the platform's shadows with explosive speed that gave the diver no time to react. The predator's massive jaws closed around Hernandez's diving helmet with crushing force that cracked the reinforced glass, designed to withstand water pressure at depths of over 100 feet. The shark's thrashing sent the diver spinning through the water while its teeth sought purchase on the helmet's metal framework. Broussard's position, 20 feet above his partner, gave him a clear view of the attack, but left him helpless to intervene immediately. His desperate descent toward Hernandez violated every safety protocol he had learned in over a decade of professional diving. But the alternative was watching the shark drag his partner into the platform's maze of underwater supports, where rescue would be impossible. The bull shark's grip on Hernandez's helmet was tenacious and terrifying. The animal's powerful neck muscles generated enough force to bend the helmet's metal framework, while its thrashing threatened to sever the diver's airline and communication cables that connected him to the surface support team. Hernandez's attempts to fight off the predator were hampered by the bulky diving equipment that made rapid movement impossible. His emergency knife was designed for cutting rope and cable, not for fighting off a 12-foot shark that outweighed him by several hundred pounds. Broussard's arrival at the attack site forced him to make split-second decisions that would determine whether both divers survived the encounter. His emergency ascent to the surface for help would leave Hernandez alone with a predator that seemed determined to kill rather than simply investigate. But staying to fight the shark put both their lives at risk. The chief diver's decision to attack the shark directly using his welding torch represented pure desperation rather than any realistic hope of driving off such a massive predator. The underwater cutting tool generated temperatures of over 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, but its effectiveness against a bull shark's thick hide and cartilaginous skeleton was questionable at best. The torch's flame striking the shark's flank caused the animal to release its grip on Hernandez's helmet and turn its attention to this new threat. Broussard found himself face to face with a predator whose black eyes showed no fear of the strange weapon that had caused it momentary pain. The shark's charge toward Broussard was swift and devastating. The animal's massive head struck the diver's chest with enough force to drive the air from his lungs and send him tumbling through the water toward the platform's support structure. The collision with a steel beam left him stunned and disoriented, while the shark circled for another attack. Hernandez's desperate ascent toward the surface with his damaged helmet was complicated by decompression requirements that made rapid surfacing potentially fatal. The nitrogen bubbles that formed in his bloodstream during the emergency ascent created a medical emergency that required immediate treatment in the platform's decompression chamber. The surface support team's emergency response brought additional divers into the water, armed with bang sticks and power heads designed for shark defense. But the bull shark had disappeared into the platform's underwater maze, leaving behind 2 injured divers and evidence that it considered the rig's support structure its exclusive territory. Hernandez survived the attack but suffered severe head injuries from the helmet's compression and permanent hearing loss that ended his diving career. The platform's management suspended underwater operations indefinitely, while marine biologists studied the shark's behavior and developed new safety protocols for working in its territory. The investigation revealed that the bull shark had been living around the platform for several months, growing larger and more aggressive as it established dominance over the artificial reef that had formed around the rig's structure. The animal's willingness to attack human divers represented an unprecedented escalation in predator behavior that challenged everything marine biologists understood about shark-human interactions. The platform's continued operation required underwater maintenance that put divers at constant risk from a predator that had already demonstrated its willingness to attack humans who entered its domain. The bull shark's territorial behavior suggested it would continue to view diving operations as intrusions that required violent response. Agent Carlos Mendoza had been patrolling the Arizona-Mexico border for 8 years when he encountered the mountain lion that would end his career with the Border Patrol in the most violent way possible. The Sonoran Desert's harsh landscape had always been dangerous for both illegal border crossers and the agents who tracked them, but the threats had traditionally been limited to extreme weather, venomous snakes, and the occasional drug smuggler willing to fight rather than surrender. The 34-year-old agent from Tucson had developed an expertise in tracking human movement through some of America's most unforgiving terrain. His ability to read sign and predict the routes taken by border crossers had made him one of the most effective agents in the Tucson sector, responsible for hundreds of apprehensions over his career. But the mountain lion that had been stalking his patrol for over 3 hours represented a threat unlike anything Mendoza had encountered in nearly a decade of desert law enforcement. The 130-pound predator had been following his movements through the rocky terrain with the patience and intelligence of a hunter that understood human behavior patterns better than most wildlife experts believed possible. The cat's stalking behavior began shortly after dawn, when Mendoza was investigating tracks left by a group of border crossers who had passed through the area during the night. The remote location, 30 miles from the nearest paved road, was typical of the routes used by smugglers seeking to avoid Border Patrol checkpoints and sensors. Mendoza's first indication that he was being watched came from his instinctive awareness that something was wrong with the desert's normal rhythm of sound and movement. The absence of bird calls and the unusual behavior of small mammals suggested the presence of a large predator that had disrupted the area's natural balance. The mountain lion's initial observations of the agent were conducted from rocky outcrops and dense vegetation that provided perfect concealment while allowing the cat to study its potential prey. The animal's behavior suggested it had encountered humans before and learned to evaluate their threat level and vulnerability. Unlike most mountain lions, which typically fled when they detected human presence, this predator seemed to be actively hunting the agent who had entered its territory. The cat's movements paralleled Mendoza's route, while maintaining a distance that kept it invisible to human observation, but close enough to launch an attack when the opportunity presented itself. The desert's extreme terrain worked in the mountain lion's favor, providing countless hiding spots among the rocky washes and dense stands of prickly pear and ocotillo that characterized the Sonoran landscape. The cat's natural camouflage made it virtually invisible against the brown and grey rocks that dominated the area. Mendoza's radio check with his supervisor at the Tucson station revealed nothing unusual about his patrol status, but his growing unease suggested that something was fundamentally wrong with his situation. His years of experience in the desert had taught him to trust his instincts when they warned of danger that couldn't be immediately identified. The agent's decision to investigate a water source near a cluster of large boulders provided the mountain lion with the perfect opportunity to launch its attack. The rocky terrain around the natural spring offered multiple approach routes, while limiting Mendoza's ability to detect movement until the predator was already within striking distance. The cat's attack came at the moment when Mendoza stopped to examine fresh tracks in the sand around the water source. The mountain lion launched itself from a rocky ledge 20 feet above, its powerful hind legs generating enough force to propel 130 pounds of muscle and bone through the air with devastating accuracy. The impact of the cat's landing drove Mendoza face first into the desert sand, his tactical vest and equipment belt providing some protection but failing to prevent the predator's claws from finding purchase in his shoulders and back. The mountain lion's initial grip was designed to immobilize its prey while positioning itself for the neck bite that would end the encounter quickly. Mendoza's survival training had included scenarios involving animal attacks, but nothing had prepared him for the reality of fighting off a predator that was perfectly designed to kill prey much larger than a human being. The cat's claws, designed to grip struggling deer and elk, raked across his shoulders, while its powerful jaws sought the neck hold that would crush his vertebrae. The agent's attempt to draw his sidearm while pinned beneath a thrashing predator proved nearly impossible. The mountain lion's weight and the awkward angle of his position made reaching his holstered weapon a desperate struggle that consumed precious seconds, while the cat's claws continued their search for a killing grip. The predator's intelligence was evident in its systematic approach to subduing its prey. The mountain lion adjusted its position repeatedly, seeking the optimal angle for delivering the crushing bite that these cats used to kill animals weighing several hundred pounds. Its patience and persistence suggested experience with prey that fought back rather than submitting immediately to predation. Mendoza's tactical radio was damaged in the initial impact, cutting off his communication with the Border Patrol station and eliminating any possibility of calling for backup. His isolation in one of America's most remote desert regions meant that rescue could be hours away, even if someone realized he was in trouble. The cat's claws found purchase in the agent's tactical vest, the reinforced fabric designed to stop bullets, providing little protection against weapons that had evolved to penetrate the thick hides of large mammals. The mountain lion's rear claws raked across Mendoza's back and legs, searching for the grip that would allow it to deliver the killing bite. The agent's desperate struggle to reach his weapon was complicated by the mountain lion's shifting weight and the disorienting effect of being attacked by a predator that moved with fluid grace despite its size and power. The cat's muscles rippled beneath its tawny coat as it adjusted its position for maximum leverage. Mendoza's successful draw of his Glock 22 came at the moment when the mountain lion's jaws were seeking the neck bite that would end his life. The weapon's muzzle was pressed against the cat's ribs when he fired the first shot, the .40 caliber round penetrating the predator's chest cavity at point-blank range. The mountain lion's reaction to being shot was immediate, but not immediately fatal. The wounded predator's increased aggression and desperation made it even more dangerous as it sought to complete the kill before its injuries became incapacitating. The cat's claws raked across Mendoza's face and neck as it fought to maintain its grip on prey that had suddenly become capable of inflicting mortal wounds. The agent's second and third shots finally convinced the mountain lion to abandon its attack and retreat toward the rocky terrain where it could escape human pursuit. The wounded predator's departure left Mendoza bleeding heavily from multiple lacerations, while facing the challenge of reaching medical help from one of the most isolated locations in the American Southwest. The agent's emergency beacon, activated after the mountain lion disappeared, brought a Border Patrol helicopter to his location within 2 hours. His survival depended on the rapid response and the fact that none of his wounds had severed major arteries, but his injuries required extensive surgery and months of rehabilitation. The mountain lion was never located despite extensive searches by wildlife officials and professional trackers. The wounded predator had disappeared into the vast wilderness of the Sonoran Desert, where it continued to pose a threat to anyone unlucky enough to encounter it. The incident became part of a growing pattern of mountain lion aggression throughout the American Southwest, forcing law enforcement agencies to reassess the dangers faced by agents working in remote border regions. Professional hunting guide Mark Stevens had been leading trophy hunts in Montana's Glacier National Park region for over 20 years when he encountered the grizzly bear that would end his career and his life in the most violent way possible. The 51-year-old outfitter from Kalispell had guided hundreds of clients through some of North America's most challenging wilderness terrain. His expertise in reading animal behavior and predicting wildlife movements, making him one of the most sought-after guides in the Rocky Mountain region. Stevens' reputation had been built on his ability to find trophy-class elk and deer while keeping his clients safe in environments where grizzly bears, mountain lions, and other dangerous predators posed constant threats. His intimate knowledge of the ecosystem surrounding Glacier National Park had earned him referrals from wealthy hunters throughout the United States and Canada. The client he was guiding on that fateful September morning was Richard Caldwell, a petroleum executive from Houston who had paid $15,000 for a week-long elk hunt in the remote wilderness areas adjacent to the national park. Caldwell had limited hunting experience, but possessed the kind of determination and financial resources that made him willing to pursue trophy animals in the most challenging terrain available. Stevens had selected a hunting area in the Flathead National Forest, where elk populations were robust, and the chances of encountering a mature bull during the peak of rutting season were excellent. The terrain was steep and heavily forested, providing ideal habitat for elk, while also supporting healthy populations of the grizzly bears that made hunting in the region so dangerous. The guide's morning scouting had revealed fresh elk sign throughout the area, including rubs on aspen trees and wallows, where bulls had been rolling in mud to coat themselves with scent during the mating season. The abundance of sign suggested that several mature bulls were competing for territory in the immediate vicinity. Stevens and Caldwell had been following a game trail through dense timber when they stumbled into a fresh kill site where a massive grizzly sow was feeding with her 2 cubs. The elk carcass was less than 12 hours old, its condition indicating that the bears had made the kill rather than scavenging carrion from another predator. The mother bear's reaction to their presence was immediate and devastating. Instead of the defensive posturing that Stevens expected from a bear protecting her cubs and food source, the sow launched an aggressive charge that covered 50 yards in a matter of seconds. Her massive bulk, easily 500 pounds of muscle and fury, moved with shocking speed through the dense undergrowth. Stevens' attempt to deploy his rifle came too late to prevent the collision that sent him sprawling beneath the charging grizzly. The bear's massive paw struck his chest with enough force to break ribs and drive the air from his lungs, while her claws raked across his hunting vest and the equipment belt that contained his emergency supplies. The grizzly's assault continued long after Stevens was down and clearly posed no threat to her cubs or food source. The animal's massive claws and teeth inflicted injuries that went far beyond what was necessary to drive away a perceived threat. Her attack displaying a level of aggression that wildlife experts had never documented in defensive encounters. The bear's massive jaws closed around Stevens' shoulder, her crushing bite designed to disable large prey, while avoiding the kind of prolonged struggle that might attract other predators to the kill site. The guide's screams echoed through the forest as the grizzly's teeth penetrated his jacket and the flesh beneath. Caldwell's position 30 yards away gave him a clear view of the attack, but left him helpless to intervene effectively. His limited hunting experience had not prepared him for a confrontation with an enraged grizzly bear that was systematically mauling his guide just yards from where he stood, frozen in terror. The client's attempt to scare the bear away by shouting and throwing rocks only seemed to increase the animal's aggression towards Stevens. The grizzly's attention remained fixed on the guide who had posed the greatest threat to her cubs, her continued assault suggesting a determination to kill rather than simply intimidate. Stevens' rifle had been knocked from his hands during the initial impact, leaving him defenseless against a predator that could crush his skull with a single bite. His attempts to protect his head and neck with his arms only provided the bear with additional targets for her claws and teeth. The grizzly's systematic destruction of Stevens continued for what felt like hours, but lasted only minutes. The animal's massive weight pinned the guide to the forest floor, while her claws and teeth sought the kind of damage that would ensure he could never again threaten her offspring. Caldwell's emergency call on his satellite phone brought rescue helicopters racing toward their location, but the remote wilderness setting made immediate evacuation impossible. The nearest landing zone was over 2 miles away, through terrain that would require ground teams to reach the attack site. The bear's eventual retreat came only after she had established complete dominance over the human intruders and ensured that her cubs could feed safely on their elk kill. Stevens was still alive when the grizzly disappeared into the dense timber, but his injuries were so severe that survival seemed impossible even with immediate medical intervention. The guide's death occurred during the helicopter evacuation, his massive blood loss and internal injuries proving fatal despite the efforts of flight medics who had treated numerous wilderness trauma cases. Stevens became another victim of grizzly bears that were losing their natural fear of humans and adopting increasingly aggressive territorial behaviors. The investigation revealed that this particular grizzly had been involved in multiple aggressive encounters with hunters and hikers throughout the Glacier National Park region. The animal's behavior suggested she had learned to view human presence as an unacceptable threat that required violent elimination rather than simple avoidance. Wildlife officials noted that the bear's willingness to continue her attack long after Stevens was incapacitated represented an unprecedented escalation in grizzly aggression. Traditional safety measures based on playing dead and avoiding eye contact were proving inadequate against predators that seemed determined to kill rather than simply drive away perceived threats. The incident forced Montana wildlife officials to close several popular hunting areas where aggressive grizzlies had been documented, but the vast wilderness of the northern Rockies made comprehensive protection impossible. Similar attacks continued to occur as bears throughout the region adopted increasingly violent responses to human intrusion into their territory. The survivors of these encounters learned that the natural world operates by ancient laws that recognize no human authority, leaving behind those who understood too late that we are not the apex predators we believed ourselves to be.